So, Berto, it's been a while since we just sort of shot the stuff, if you will.
Shot the stuff?
Let's just shoot the stuff. What do you say?
Let's shoot the stuff. Let's do it.
This is the Psychology in Seattle podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor.
My name is Humberto Castañeda. I work for a company called Amontillado, and I make casks.
So I thought we would review different movies that we've seen recently, and I was making a list and realized I've seen a lot of movies recently.
Oh boy,
Because
you don't never not see a lot of it.
But this time, really in particular. But let's talk about the Batman because we saw this together.
Yeah.
So Rotten Tomatoes, what do you think
Rotten Tomatoes
critics gave it?
Critics gave it 92.
89, really close. What about audience?
Audience was a little more confused, and they gave it an 85.
89. 89,
Okay.
89. A rare audience critic
That is
agreement.
rare.
Yeah, you would think that I wouldn't be surprised if this movie got bad critic reviews, but awesome audience reviews, because I feel like there's a lot of fanboys out there that like this.
That's true, although it was also the kind of look of it and whatever is the kind of movie I would think critics would actually like. So
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And I guess they both liked it.
How many Bertos out of 10 would you give it?
I'm trying to remember what I said at the time, but I think I gave it like an 8, if I remember.
8.5 or so. 8,
8.5. Yeah, it might have been 8.5. And my gestalt was that it's got flaws and it's uneven and long, but there were a lot of things about it that made it very enjoyable. And the look was great. The acting was cool. And it was a different take on it. It was definitely, I was very skeptical. I'm like, okay, now what? But it was good. It was a different take.
Yeah. I gave it 7 out of 10. Definitely a good movie. I thought it was too long. I find myself saying that with almost every movie now.
Yeah, they're all long now.
But Matt Reeves, the director-writer, is turning into one of my favorite movie director-writers.
What else have they done?
He, in 2000, wrote The Yards, which I don't think you've seen, with Mark Wahlberg, Joaquin Phoenix, Charlize Theron. It's one of my favorite movies. Is
that a football?
No, it's like a crime situation. And then he directed Cloverfield, which was
I love that.
groundbreaking. You and I saw that in the theater together, and one of our other friends got motion sick while watching it.
It's that kind of movie, yes.
And then he directed in 2010 Let Me In, the Swedish the adaptation of the Swedish movie.
Yeah. I didn't see that one.
In 2014, he directed Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, and in 2017, he wrote and directed War of the Planet of the Apes. And those two movies I find to be two of the best movies of all time. Really, I've been revisiting the trilogy, the most recent trilogy of Planet of the Apes, and also I've been watching.
Sorry, did he not have anything to do with the third one?
That is the third one, War.
Oh, I see. So he didn't.
No. What is the third one? Anyway,
I don't know, but I know that there were.
He didn't have to do with one of them, but
Okay.
I find the trilogy to be one of the most perfect trilogies of all time. It's so good. Anyway, so let me tell you what I liked, and then you can tell me what you liked. And we're not going to spoil anything. I liked the cinematography. I mean, the cinematography and the vibe was just perfection. It was so consistent, so not super unique, but unique enough where I thought, wow, I'm really entering a world here. Even the way that people acted, it just felt very gritty and dirty. And as I describe that, it's like, well, Blade Runner did that sort of thing. But this movie just takes that to a whole other... I'm wondering if there's a new direction in movie directing or TV directing where they want things to be really psychologically claustrophobic, and this movie kind of felt that way.
It definitely had that, yeah.
The action was pretty good. Pattinson actually plays a pretty good action star.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, this is one of the best Batman movies. I'm not a huge Batman movie fan. And so for me, this might be, if I were to rewatch a Batman movie, this might be the one.
Okay.
I'm not a huge fan of I mean, I liked the Nolan movies, but I'm not like gaga
crazy
the way people are. The acting was great. The villain's motivation I liked. the relationship between Batman and Catwoman, I thought was they didn't fall into the tropes that other depictions will, right? Where she's this slut who like comes along, and it didn't have any of that kind of silliness. And you also didn't get the sense like she was an underling. You got a sense like she was a hero in her own right and had power and competence. I like the fact that Batman was vulnerable, that you had a sense that if he gets, I remember we were talking about it right after the movie. We were like, remember that time when he like hits that that metal bar, and I like physically cringed when I saw that scene. And how often are we watching an action movie where the hero smashes into something and you're just like, yeah, well, he has some sort of nanoparticle armor that protects him from that, and I'm sure everything's fine. But this movie, you really get a sense like, no, he's just a dude with like Kevlar vests on and stuff, right?
Totally.
And I like the fact that we have a hero, particularly Batman, who is moving away from the steroid man and back to the emo boy. Like I'm so tired of every single guy in every action movie has obviously been working out 6 hours a day and is either on steroids or some other plan that makes him out to be just some sort of freak of nature, you know, like Hugh Jackman and all these kinds of people. I mean, at least with Wolverine, it makes sense because that character, you know, iconically is very strong and uses his hands. But Batman, I don't think of Batman as like Arnold Schwarzenegger. I think of Batman as the Adam West of my youth, you know, a kind of a doughy, tall, wisecracking, smart guy, you know?
Right.
I also like fact...
even Wolverine is not, you know, he's supposed to be small and very agile and sure, very strong, but not because he's a bodybuilder.
Right.
So no, you're right though. That is the default, and it was great to see. Just like, I mean, he was fit. He was definitely fit, but just like a normal dude.
I don't think it didn't look to me like he had worked out at all. Like I don't know if the guy has ever worked out in his life. It doesn't look that way to me, which is fine. In fact, that was one of the reasons why I liked Josh Hartnett. He was a big thing, you know, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And I always respected him for never falling into that trap of, well, you gotta like cut, you gotta work out 6 hours a day to look a certain way. And just for me as a viewer, I'm not into that look so much and that vibe. And two, because, you know, with the Nolan movies with Christian Bale, when he takes his shirt off, you're like, oh my God, Batman works out 6 hours a day. Because that's what you have to do.
They should show us the behind the scenes where Batman's like missing, the bat signal's going. He's like, I can't leave right now. I'm still in the middle of my workout.
Yeah.
And then the Commissioner Gordon's like, what's going on, Batman? Well, dude, do you want me to look good or what?
Yeah, exactly. So there's that. And I also like the fact that they didn't fall into a lot of the Batman tropes, like the parents being shot and having all those, you know, iconic scenes. That
they didn't revisit the origins, right?
Yeah. In fact, they didn't really talk at all about the origin, right? It was just, we just sort of are into the story, which I thought was interesting.
I mean, obviously it was there and they touched on it, but it wasn't the point, and there was no big scene about it. And
yeah. What did you like about the movie?
Yeah, I share your appreciation that it did create its own little universe. It was consistent, and from beginning to end, it felt like we were inhabiting their reality. That's always fun. I thought he did an amazing job. I've always liked him as an actor, even though I only watched the first Twilight and I didn't like it. But it wasn't because of him. He's fine. I loved him in Harry Potter. I've loved him in everything I've seen. And so I thought, okay, so I wasn't like, when it was announced that he was going to be the Batman, I was never like worried about that. I just wasn't sure if I needed another Batman right now, but he was great. And the aesthetic was, now one thing, I don't want to get into the things I didn't like yet, but one thing I was actually hoping they would push even further in is it did give me a little bit of that, that Seven vibe, the detective vibe. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. It brought it back down to earth a lot more. similar to the Michael Keaton. Of course, Michael Keaton had all the additional weirdness of the Tim Burton, side of things. But at the same time, Michael Keaton himself was really more like a normal dude. And so it did that. I liked the overall action. It was great. There were some sequences like the car chase that was unusual because it gave you that kind of intensity where you're right by the wheel at one point and you're seeing the things happening as if you're sort of in the car with the participants. And
that's what I mean by
really
the claustrophobia. And the use of light in, it's a very dark...
Light and shadow, yeah.
It's a very shadowy, actually, photon-wise, very dark movie. But at the same time, the use of light, like in that car chase, it's just incredible to think, to see such artistry. There are certain frames of that movie, including that car chase, where it's like, that would look good on a art show wall.
Some very iconic moments, like the moment when he's walking into the water with the torch, the red torch. It's just like beautiful. And also, I agree, Catwoman was not treated there were more layers to Catwoman, yet the actress did amazing and she was really good. I also liked the interesting thing about the bad guys too, where there was more than one. It was an ecosystem. And normally you think like, oh, the Penguin is just like crazy and stuff. But he is kind of like not yet in charge of things. And he's like one of the people that is a mob boss, but not like the main guy. And I liked seeing that too. I also, the actor that plays the main bad guy is, I guess I shouldn't spoil it because you don't know. Anyways, I like the actor that plays the main bad guy.
It's hard to even see him through the makeup. What I didn't like was the length, as I said. I easily could find at least 30 minutes where you could cut. There were a number of scenes where, like, I hate to do this, but Catwoman could have been cut, honestly, and you could have introduced her in the second movie. Because I feel like a lot of these movies, I think particularly DC movies, suffer from this problem where they're trying to catch up to MCU without doing the work,
Well, that is true, certainly, of the Justice League. I would not see this movie in that category. I don't think the story. I mean, it would have had to undergo quite a few changes.
Argue, well, just before you answer this, which I'm interested in, the additional data point is they crammed in a lot of villains at the very end. That was completely unnecessary. You didn't have to do that.
That's true.
The other thing that we were talking about right after the movie was that the motivation of the villain, I thought, once revealed after 2.5 hours of watching the movie, was actually really interesting. And although I think you were saying you suspected this to be true, I did not. I just thought it was some psychopath who was doing horrible things. And at the very end, you're like, oh, he actually has and I won't spoil it, but he has a pretty interesting motivation for why he's committing these crimes. And if I had known that or had wondered ways, then I think it would have made the movie much more enjoyable. Because as I'm watching the movie, I'm just like, okay, this is good, interesting cinematography, acting, da-da-da. Oh, but Batman is just dealing with a psychopath. He's dealing with some sort of lunatic who is out to just kill a bunch of people, or he has a vendetta against certain groups of people. And it just didn't really grab me as much as I think it would have if they would have revealed that earlier on.
That's interesting. Did you play the Arkham Asylum and
a little
Arkham
bit
City games?
But those kind of video games, like the Spider-Man video games, are similar to that. I find that once I get into it, I'm like, this is just kind of a grind. You're just kind of mission this, and all the missions kind of feel the same, and you're doing these battles with like 20 different goons and punch, kick, kick.
Love those.
And it just gets boring to me.
Okay. So it's probably a genre thing, because for me it felt great because it's a combination of a fighting game, like Street Fighter or something, and a little RPG game. But the reason I was bringing it up is the joke, the Riddler in that. doesn't really have a main purpose. The story, at least in the Arkham Asylum, it's fun because it adds this little meta game where you can collect all the little riddles and get information about everyone. But so I think that is, I don't know if it was a misdirection or whatever. It is true that there was a way to interpret the first part of the movie as just like, yeah, well, it's, the Riddler. What are you going to do? He's crazy. And yet it was a little bit more on the Seven side of things where, yeah, of course the guy is a psychopath and crazy, but had a plan, right? And this is one of those cases.
Yeah. So other things that I've seen, Berto, are the following. So strap yourself in, listeners, because this is a long ass list.
Oh my God!
Because the Oscars, and there's always this race to watch all the Oscars movies.
Oh yeah, I watched a ton of movies right before the Oscars.
Yeah. So, but a TV show that I just finished is Severance on Apple TV.
Oh, you did finish it? Okay.
With Adam Scott, and I would give it a 9 out of 10. I thought
you did?
it was,
okay, because you were telling me that you were really enjoying it and you were kind of holding judgment to the end, which obviously you shouldn't spoil because I want to watch it.
Right. Yeah. The ending is interesting, so it would be horrible to spoil it. Okay. But I had heard from a podcaster actually that the end of the season doesn't wrap it up. That there must be a second season or something.
I see.
And I was worried that it would. And plus, the story is kind of like Lost. You're watching. There's all these mysteries, and so I was worried that it would go completely off the rails like Lost would, but it definitely didn't. It's made by Ben Stiller actually. He directs, and I think he might write a lot of the episodes.
Oh my God!
But
so is it a funny show?
It has humor to it for sure, and it has a heart, and it has really interesting characters, really interesting story.
Like a Devs kind of show. Okay.
Yeah, it is kind of like Devs. It kind of reminded me of that, but it's different. And so I would recommend Severance. It's 9 episodes, and know that it doesn't wrap up. In fact, one could argue season 1 ends at the midpoint of a story, if that makes any, like it doesn't really wrap up. The way it was described to me is it wraps up a lot of things, but it leaves some things unanswered. That's not how I would describe. I would describe it as
the smoke monster.
It's like in the middle of a movie, they just turn it off, and you're like, what? But it's interesting enough along the way, and there better be a second season, is all I have to say. Right. Everything, Everywhere, All at Once.
Yes.
Wait, did we see that together?
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
We saw it all at once.
Yeah. When did we see this movie, Berto?
We went with my
that's right,
buddy.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. We went to Northgate. Yeah. So, Berto, what did you think of this movie?
Okay, so quite an experience. It is, you described it, I think, as a roller coaster ride. It is one of those, although not, so to me, the movie Gravity was a roller coaster ride. But this one, to me, was a roller coaster ride with layers, because I certainly kind of want to watch it again and see a little bit more. But it was destabilizing. It wasn't really what I expected from the preview, in that I expected it to be more like thoroughly action-packed. And I'm not disappointed by the fact that there was more downtime, as you will. Again, a little long, but
yeah, a little long,
but a lot of heart. Really touching, and a little bit of a brain twister, because they do a lot of multiverse stuff, but they do it in a different way. It is sort of the story is told from the perspective. It's a narrower perspective on the multiverse, because when you do a multiverse story, the multiverse is your oyster. Instead, they kept it fairly narrow. They picked a few random examples of things and kind of kept it to that. I liked it. Very much enjoyed it. I gave it a. I think I gave it an 8.5 or a 9. Yeah.
I gave it a 9, yeah.
A 9 might have been what I gave it, yeah.
Yeah, I gave it an 8. I thought it was long. In fact, I didn't tell you about this afterwards, Berto, but I was actually having, I think, a reaction to my booster.
Oh, you were getting your booster right before that, yeah.
Yeah, I got my booster before that, and I was starting, I think, to feel sick, but I didn't really notice it, and I actually took a small nap in the middle of that movie.
Okay.
Because you know how you get when you're kind of
yep.
sick, you're just like,
I wonder what you missed.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah, I gave it an 8 out of 10. I thought it was amazing. I want to give it 2 different ratings. I want to give it a 10 out of 10 for style, for uniqueness, maybe the way to put it is 10 out of 10 for the experience.
Yeah, right.
I highly recommend, if you haven't already, to see this in a movie with a lot of people, because
I'd see it in a theater. Yeah.
It's like, you said it was like a roller coaster. I would say it's like a roller coaster on a roller coaster, because it is so chaotic. I've never seen a movie like this before.
And it's funny chaos.
Yeah, the visuals. I mean, just the fact that they're Asians on the just that alone. But the storyline, the look of it, the writing, the vibe, the way it made me feel. I mean, it is. Yeah. We will probably never have another movie that will make you feel like, because if another movie comes out that's like this, you'd be like, they're just doing whatever. It's a total groundbreaking style. The first 20 minutes I thought was a perfect movie to begin with. It's very chaotic, and it's about this family that lives above a dry or a laundromat, and they're about to have a party, and so there's all these things that are happening, and this all's chaos, and they're
not doing well, as a family. There's all sorts of marital problems and problems with the kid and all these things.
Yeah, and they're being audited by the IRS, who the IRS agent is played just amazingly by what's her face.
By I was going to say Sigourney, but it's
oh my goodness,
from True Lies.
Everything, Everywhere at Once. Oh my God, we're just
and Trading Places. Curtis, Jamie Lee Curtis.
Jamie Lee Curtis, yeah.
Yes.
I feel like I frequently can't remember her name, but Jamie Lee Curtis is playing a character that is just, I mean, it's unbelievable. And of course,
it's awesome.
Michelle Yeoh is just amazing. And then, what's his face?
Was it actually the guy you were saying from Indiana Jones?
Yeah, Ke Huy Quan.
Oh my gosh.
He was, very funny, Dr. Jones.
That was such a good call, because you said it at the very beginning.
Well, because I heard his voice. And
but we only had like a moment of it. It was like a snapshot. And
but
you're
then
like,
when I saw his face, I'm like, well, wait, is that the guy? And then later looked it up and like, it's just amazing. Now, my dislike of the movie that took me out of the experience was, and I won't spoil it, there are a few storylines within the story that go obviously to the absurd. And, almost Rick and Morty-esque, if you will.
Or being John Malkovich's
Yeah, but I don't know. It just felt like, okay, now you're just, I don't know. Now you're just kind of, it was similar to that, I was telling you after the movie, that movie Sorry to Bother You, I think.
Yeah,
was that the movie? Similar situation where I was really enjoying it. Very interesting vibe it was putting forth, but then it just gets like, wait, what is happening? And then I'm like, and I'm thinking, well, maybe this will pull back around, and it never did with that movie. And I thought, and I'm just not a fan of surreal art.
Okay.
I'm just not
That's
into
fair.
it.
I actually happened to enjoy those because I thought they were some of the funnier things, but I totally could see. In fact, I think my wife hasn't seen it. I want her to watch it. I bet you she's going to be bothered by some of that too, because it is too weird and cringy in a way. But I liked it.
It's like a cutscene on The Family Guy or something, or something. It just didn't seem to fit for me, because it felt like it was trying to be metaphorical about life, but not like completely making fun of itself. It just felt like it took me out of it and made me care less about the characters, because I'm just like, I won't spoil. I want to talk about these different universes.
Right, but I will say, without going into specifics, one thing that it does do, and maybe you're right that it might go overboard with it, but it was presenting topics like, hey, bias against homosexuality, right? And it's saying, wait, you're still stuck on me being a homosexual in lieu of all these weird dimensions you've just witnessed, you know? And that's an interesting thing, right? It just like shows you like our human perspective. You don't need to go to those extremes, granted, but our human perspective is so narrow. And if you really consider the wide array of experiences that there could exist, it's like, okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
And so it was making that point. I also think that there was just a flat out humor element to it, because this movie reminded me spiritually a little bit of Kung Fu, what's it called? That was
another movie that I was...
which is totally absurd, but it's Kung Fu Hustle,
Yeah, I was
it's
not
totally
a huge
absurd,
fan.
way over the top, yes. But it is that kind of style of humor, and
Which, not for me. Not for me, Berto.
but the majority of the movie, I'd say maybe 80% of the movie wasn't that.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It was enough, not that.
Yeah.
And also, given how much I was kind of like, it didn't pull me out completely, because the movie moves so fast from visual to visual that they don't really stay with one thing. And I will say, without spoiling it, that there is a absurd universe that I actually really enjoyed.
Yeah,
and you know the one I'm talking about.
Oh, yes.
That I actually thought, even though that's absurd as well and completely
it was
ridiculous,
touching,
but it was dealt in a way that felt less Family Guy. You know, it was less South Parky to me.
Right. It was a touching metaphor, and it was great.
Yeah. I mean, there's again, I don't want to spoil it, but there's that scene on the cliffside, shall we say?
Yes.
Where if you just describe this scene, they'd be like, "That's ridiculous. That's dumb. There's nothing happening." But the lead up to that is so effective that you're watching this scene and you might start crying during this completely lifeless scene. But
it also offers a calm moment in the movie.
Right.
So it also acts as
visually
a bit of a
calm.
buffer.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Anyway, let's take a break and we get back more movies that we have seen. What do you say?
Let's do it.
Hey, deserving listeners, today's episode is sponsored by HelloFresh. When you sign up, use the code Seattle16. HelloFresh sends you easy-to-make meal kits delivered right to your door every week. Ingredients travel from farm to your doorstep in under a week, so they're always fresh, all without having to leave your house, which appeals to me because I hate running errands, puts me in a bad mood, to be honest. HelloFresh is super flexible. You can skip weeks when you need to. You can pick your favorites from 50 different weekly options. In our house, we love all the recipes, but some of them that are really great are the citrus beef tacos, their barbecue sloppy joes, and their pizzas. You know, me and my pizzas. So go to HelloFresh.com/Seattle16, that's Seattle16, and use the code Seattle16 for up to 16 free meals and 3 free gifts. Again, go to HelloFresh.com/Seattle16 and use the code Seattle16 for up to 16 free meals and 3 free gifts. And remember that HelloFresh is America's #1 meal kit. All right, we're back from the break. Let's do an OPP, Berto.
OPP.
So these people became patrons all the way back in April of 2020 and have stayed patrons ever since. We have...
Through thick and pandemic thin.
Yeah, we have Michael from Quebec. Oh. We have Lena from Germany, I believe. We have Sandy Valswin, Anna, Lynn, Danielle, and Laura from God knows where. We have Megan from Lockyer, in Australia. I thought it was Washington, but it was there must be some province in Australia, WA. I wonder what that one is.
Wow.
You have Sarah from Seattle.
Nice.
You have Aoif? How would you pronounce this? Aoife. That's a lot of that'd be a really good Wordle begin, right? From Great Britain, Belfast.
Okay.
We'll talk about that movie in a second. And we got Zittel from Hollister, California. So thank you so much for becoming patrons and staying patrons through thick and thin, because that's really what matters. It's one thing to sign up for a month. That's nice. But it's another thing to, stick around, people.
I wonder if anyone out there believes that God Knows Where is a real place.
I know.
Because, you know, when you get compilations of music from movies, it always says by various artists, or like when you do a Siri or Google request for the songs, it says such and such by various artists. My little 6-year-old was convinced that that was the name of the band. And they're like, wow, that band does a lot of music. It's like, yeah, let's go watch various artists in concert.
Well, before we get back to movies, we went to Disneyland. Let's talk about it.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Give us the lowdown, Berto.
Not only did we go, like you and me, like I took my family and my brother went. And
Yeah.
we together had never been to Disneyland. Like he had been, I had been, we'd never been together. Because as kids, I didn't live with him at the time where he went and so forth.
Yeah.
So that was kind of cool.
Yeah. So
Also,
all of
we got
us
to go
and
to-
our spouses and your two kids.
And my two kids, yeah.
Your little kids.
We
yeah.
got
Who
to
are
go
the
to Star
perfect
Wars
Disneyland
land.
age. Your kids are like perfect
Oh
Disneyland
yeah,
age.
totally. In fact, what's weird is my 11-year-old, this was her first time riding roller coasters because she was deathly afraid of them before. And yet my 6-year-old was also her first time riding roller coasters because, I don't know, they're just different personalities.
Well, your little one is an agent of chaos. So
yeah, basically. And we went to Star Wars Land.
yeah.
You know, that was
Yeah, it was
kinda
amazing.
spiritual.
I went to the make your own lightsaber thing, and it's this. Have you done the get your own wand thing at
Yes.
at Harry Potter?
Yeah.
I feel like it was kind of like that, where you enter a special room and it really feels immersive, and there's actors, but I got chills. I mean, this
Totally.
Yoda's voice comes over the intercom, and
Yeah.
you know, it's completely dumb. It's just Disneyland, but somehow it felt, there's something that they do where and the workers weren't really putting their best acting, or they weren't good actors, you know, but it was just enough to
But
really
it's
make
enough,
me
yeah.
feel like it was something really cool. And so, yeah, the Star Wars land was amazing. It's mostly land and not as much things to do. It's just a lot of
Right.
Y-
It
like you
looks
c-
like the universe, and there are
Yeah.
people walking around, stormtroopers, and then you get to build a robot, or you get to build a lightsaber, and then there's a few rides. Not many. There's like 2 main rides.
only 2 rides. I think there's only
Yeah.
2 rides in Star
And then
Wars
you can
land.
go to Cantina, which we didn't go, but and you get to drink blue milk, which we did do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, I've been to Disneyland and Disney World a number of times, and every time I go, it's only been for a day because it's really expensive and I usually don't have much time. And this time you bought us all 4-day tickets.
It was a big present for all of y'all.
Yeah.
Because for you, I got it for our anniversary, right?
Yeah.
And then for my bro, it was the big Christmas gift.
And so we were able to really take our time and really explore the full park. And for me, and you know, California Adventure and all that stuff, and I feel like, and the other factor was, I've realized, so I was at Disneyland, I don't know, 5 years ago, and I went on Space Mountain, which is a classic ride. You got to go on Space Mountain. For those who don't know, it's a old roller coaster that is inside and it's dark, so you can't see, or there's little things you can kind of see, but
Yeah.
so, and it 5 years ago was fine. This time I went on it, I nearly vomited halfway through, or actually almost immediately.
Oh my gosh.
Your inner ear starts to solidify or slow down or something, to the point where it can't quickly adjust to
those changes.
your head being oriented in different ways, and so you get nauseous much faster. Plus, I've always been prone to seasickness and car sickness ever since I was a young child, and so that limited my options in terms of rides to some extent.
That's true.
So it was pretty easy for me to feel like I had fully exhausted the park after a couple days.
That's true.
For the first time in my life, because
Yeah.
you know, like if you've ever been to the Louvre or something, if you go there for a day, you only get to see like a certain portion of it. You're like, oh, I missed out. And I always kind of felt that way at Disneyland, but I feel like, okay, I've fully exhausted. I feel like I don't really ever have to go back. I love it, and I would especially if kids are there. Being with your kids, it was really fun to see them enjoying themselves. Yeah. But for me personally, kind of feel like I could tap out on this one.
Right. Well, that was interesting because again, like my experience with Disneyland is that I like everything about it. Like I like the walking around. I like all that stuff. And then as I grew a little older, there are some rides that I also don't enjoy as much. Disneyland doesn't have really crazy roller coasters. California Adventure does have one that I no longer do, which is the one that goes upside down. And when I was younger, I used to love roller coasters. The harder, the better. And then a few years ago, maybe 5-6 years or something, I was in Orlando and I did one of those. It was the Incredible Hulk at Universal Studios Islands of Adventure. Awesome roller coaster. It goes super fast and immediately turns you and spins you. And something weird happened where I just felt my head was just getting kind of knocked around, and so I was nervous the whole ride because I'm like, oh man, I'm kind of getting too jostled. And
yeah,
and then right
that
after
happened to me on and there's a ride called the Kraken at SeaWorld in Orlando, and I just felt like this should be illegal. This is too
too much.
This is violent. I mean, I'm sure someone's broke their neck on this thing is what I'm saying.
Right. So that was at the end of that ride, I was like, oh, because I used to love that one. So I was like, okay, something's changed in me. I'm getting older or whatever. So now I mostly do, Space Mountain's still okay for me. I don't get nauseous and it doesn't knock me around that much. But any roller coaster that either does full flips or just really bumpy and stuff, I can't stand it. And I really, that does narrow my options on other parks. But Disney has a lot of like, you just look at things, or there are those rooms where like the tiki room, and you just sit and watch little animated things. And a lot of the modern rides have the 3D glasses, and it's not so much a roller coaster as like an experience where you're walking around or running around in a little car and you're shooting at things or whatever. Those I enjoy. I don't get sick on those, luckily. So
I do kind of get sick on those slightly, not as bad as the other ones. But the other thing that I liked about this trip was that for the first time I stayed in a hotel right next to the park. I've never done that before. I don't think
so you'd always have to drive a while.
Yeah. The other thing, and park in that humongous parking lot, the other thing that I liked about it was there were a couple of nights where Stacy and I, we'd go to dinner with y'all and we'd have a couple drinks, and then we'd go on rides late at night by ourselves, and there's hardly any lines at that point, right? Because everyone's left.
Thinning out.
And it was really fun. Stacy and I, after the last night we were there with, and she was just really wanting to go on rides, and it was dark. So cool. And so we went on Splash Mountain again. She was like, I want to go, because she went on Splash Mountain with you, right?
You did Splash Mountain?
Yeah.
At night?
Yeah, but I sat in the very back seat, so I wouldn't get soaked. I still got a little wet, but we figured, well, this is one of the last rides, and if we get wet, we can go back to the hotel.
Stacy and I went on Splash Mountain with my two kids.
Yeah.
And I was in the front. I think this is the most I've ever gotten wet in Splash Mountain, because there was like a tidal wave, and it wasn't even in the final drop. It was in like the in-between drop. A tidal wave that just landed squarely on me, got completely drenched, and my little one, my 6-year-old, was behind me. She didn't get that wet, but for whatever reason, this ride, even though she liked Space Mountain and the Big Thunder and stuff, this one had her in tears by the end. So that was kind of a little sad.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really great hanging out with your littlest one.
Oh yeah, I have some great pictures of you, Uncle Kirk. Yeah, I've always thought she was fun, but she's at that perfect age where, she's tough enough to take it, and she's also
old enough to regulate for long enough that she doesn't have meltdowns, because she used to have a fair amount of meltdowns.
Oh, of course, yeah.
A few years ago, like getting tired and that kind of thing.
I was really a little bit concerned when we arrived because we forgot to bring we had this little portable stroller, which, by the way, let me tell you, this thing, we paid like, I don't know, $19 for it at Toys R Us when my first kid was like 1 or less. And it has lasted us through trips to Colombia, multiple trips to Disney, trips all over the place. And me manhandling it, because we'd go fast with Daddy, where I'd put her in there and just go and run and stuff. That thing is a beast. And sadly, we forgot it this time. And I was kind of concerned because I was thinking, oh no, now we're going to, she's going to complain like 2 steps in, I want to be carried and stuff. No, it was great. Yes, a couple little bit of moments here and there, but after a full day, who isn't?
Yeah.
I was quite satisfied that she's at a different stage.
She did amazing and very, very mature for her age in that context. This is one time where I was carrying her on my shoulders, and she was giving me a Spanish lesson. Did you hear her?
No.
Yeah, it was elaborate. I mean, it was...
Really?
She is... I think she's the genius in the family, Berto, because
Might be.
She had a whole curriculum off the top of her head.
Really?
And she's like, it's A, E, I, O, U.
Oh.
And so she's like, repeat after me. Right. And then I'm like, okay. And then she's like, when you have R's, it's ra. And so you have ra, re, ri, ro, ru. And so repeat after me. And so I was doing that.
God, that's hilarious.
And then but it was funny because her vocabulary, she acted like she knew everything about Spanish, and she did about certain things, but then there were very simple words that I actually knew, but I didn't want to say I knew because she was the one giving me the lesson. And she's like, what's the word for man? That's when we actually came up to you and said,
yes.
Daddy, what's the word for man in Spanish?
Yeah.
And, but I will say, Berto, that, and I told you this down there, that you were you were in charge of everything, and you were a very patient organizer. You never flipped out. You were always accommodating, and it was soothing to have you at the wheel.
Well, it was a pleasure. I really, it's funny. Many, many years ago, I got in a little debate with our mutual friend Mitch. It was about some sort of activity. It was a movie or something, and it was like mainly he wanted to do the activity, and for me it was more important that we were with specific people, and we just were like debating about that. But it really is, for me, I think the people I do stuff with is almost more important than the thing I'm doing.
Totally.
And so, and of course in this case the thing we're doing is like freaking Disney, so it makes it even better. But it's kind of was a dream come true for me because I had never really... No, that's not true. The last time I did like a Disney with a friend, where it was just, sharing those moments, has been years and years, and it's so rare to do. And so this was great. Like I had my brother and my co-podcaster and friend and Age of Empires crazy partner. It was great. Just fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Getting back to the movies I saw, while we were in Anaheim, Stacy and I went to... I actually every night watched a movie to fall asleep, and also we went to a movie one night, and we went to see The Lost City, which has Sandra Bullock and Channing Tatum. And
is that the one you said is like Romancing the Stone?
Yeah. It's like a updated, better Romancing the Stone. And I gave it 8 out of 10. I thought it was extremely... fun and refreshing and funny and action-packed, and the chemistry between Sandra Bullock and Channing Tatum was good. I thought it was a refreshing movie in a landscape of a lot of boring, depressing movies. It's like when we grew up, it was all fun movies. There weren't very many depressing movies, and
or if there were, you didn't know where to find them.
Right. And I love a good depressing movie for sure, but I think we need to the pendulum needs to swing back a little bit. Another movie that I saw was down there on I think Amazon is The Tomorrow War with Chris Pratt. And I was telling you that.
Oh, right. I want to see that.
Of all the sort of Michael Bay-ish movies, this is the best, or one of the best. It's absurd. It when you're watching it, you're like, oh, that's like The Edge of Tomorrow. Oh, that's like Starship Troopers. Oh, that's like that movie. But it's pulled together pretty well, and the story is pretty good, and Chris Pratt is great, and I gave it a 7 out of 10. It's a totally watchable movie, fun, it's a popcorn movie, you know.
Wow.
And I'm a little sad that it didn't get more press, because I feel like if this movie came out, I don't know, 7 years ago or something, it would have been the talk of the town, because it really has all the markers of a blockbuster summer movie. But I feel like it kind of got buried in the press or something, because I think it's only on Amazon, and not a lot of people are like, let's go on Amazon Prime and watch brand new movies. It doesn't usually occur.
Speaking of movies that are fun, I just watched The Free Guy finally.
Oh, is it good?
Oh, you haven't seen it? Yeah, it's totally fun.
Yeah.
It is Lego movie meets The Matrix and a little bit of a good version of Ready Player One.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
it looks
it's
really
a
good.
fun movie.
Yeah, I want to see it.
Yeah. And cute. It's a cute movie too. It's not exactly what I expected. It's got a heart inside of it.
Well, I saw Ryan Reynolds' other movie, The Adam Project. Have you seen that?
Was that time travel related?
Yes.
No. Okay. No, I haven't seen it, but I heard there. Yeah, I've seen like a blurb about it. It sounds interesting.
I gave it a 6 out of 10. It's watchable.
It is good, but
it's missable. It's not a necessity that you watch it, but it's a fun movie you watch with the kids. But it's not amazing. Ryan Reynolds is great. But I have an announcement to make, Berto, that we have another famous person that I found out actually listens to the podcast.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. So listener Aurora Otmar wrote in and said that her sister, who is Andrea Otmar, who is the producer of the movie The Worst Person in the World, which was nominated for an Oscar.
Yeah.
And that both Aurora and her sister Andrea, and according to Aurora, all her family listened to the podcast.
Whoa.
And so we have another famous person, Berto. It's you always know you've made it when the producer
when someone listens
of a semi well-known movie is now listening to your podcast. Another movie I watched when I was down there is I Want You Back with Charlie Day and Jenny Slate.
Yeah, you mentioned that was a good
yeah, it's a rom-com. And rom-coms are, there's a formula to it, and it follows that basic formula, but I thought it was actually really good, and it was believable and really funny. Charlie Day, Jenny Slate are two of the funniest people on the planet. It's not really played to their humor aspect. It's more of like their dramatic with a little bit of humor aspect. But I thought I gave it 8 out of 10. I thought it was really good. I've seen a lot of good movies. On the way down on the plane, Berto, I watched again True Grit with...
That's great.
With what's his face? Jeff Daniel. No. God damn it. So, we have the same.
Rush.
We have the same. I'm trying to. God. Jeff Bridges. It's a Coen Brothers movie, and the first time I saw it in the theater 12 years ago. And I think I gave it like a 6 or a 7, and I don't know why, but I rewatched it on the way down, and every scene, particularly the first half, is perfection. That the girl, what's her name, Haley Steinfeld, she and the way they write her character, it's just it's so good. She's such a well written character. The way it ends is really, it feels real, and
totally.
Matt Damon is amazing in it. It's just a really, really good movie.
Yeah, I really love that movie.
Also on the plane, I watched Tick, Tick, Boom with Andrew Garfield.
Oh, okay. So you did watch that. I was so curious what that was during the Oscars. I hadn't even heard of it.
Yeah, it's a musical about a guy who writes musicals, and the guy at the center, the guy that Andrew Garfield plays, is the guy who wrote the musical Rent.
Oh, which I love.
And
my brother hates for some reason.
who died tragically just before it was on stage for the first time or something. And so it's his story about trying to, write a hit musical and always failing because it's really hard, obviously, to get into that business. And it's his relationship with his his friends and whatnot. And I found there were some scenes in the beginning. I was like, okay, I'm on board with this. This is good. Andrew Garfield is amazing. But I don't know, like some of the musical numbers, I was bored. Some of the storyline, I was bored. It was too long. And I also wish, maybe everyone understands this, but I didn't realize that this was a real person until the very end when they reveal that he wrote Rent. And
are you spoiling it right now? Was that?
No, I feel like most people probably know that from the beginning, and that's why they would watch it. But yeah, I just, I thought it was just kind of, ugh. But 5 out of 10. There's some watchable moments, I suppose, and there are some good songs as well. Anyway, Drive My Car, the Japanese movie that was up for an Oscar. Have you seen it?
No, we talked about in the Oscar party. We talked about it because you mentioned it was because it's like 3 hours, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when we were doing the math of which movies
like
we
5
could
hours.
watch,
Let's put it that way.
Right. When we were trying to cram in as many movies as we could before the Oscars, we thought of that one and we're like, oh my gosh, 3 hours. No. And so we tried to opt for the shorter movies, and there weren't that many, but
yeah, right. There weren't that many. Yeah. So the reviews of this movie are off the charts. People, particularly critics, I think, just love this movie. And, I'm Japanese, so I'm supposed to like it. I didn't. I thought it was fine. If I didn't know it was up for an Oscar, I would say I would have been like, maybe it would have helped me if it wasn't up for an Oscar. I could have just watched it more passively or something and been pleasantly surprised by some of it. But, and the subject matter is interesting, and it's a unique look. Again, it's about a playwright, and he does these interesting, he does a version of a not a Japanese play, but like a Russian play or a European or American play. And he will cast actors who speak different languages, and then on a screen behind the stage, there's a translation in Japanese for the for the Japanese audience. And so everyone, they don't understand each other because there'll be like a Vietnamese person saying their lines in Vietnamese, and then an American person saying their lines in English. And
so only the audience understands what's happening?
Yeah, right.
Because they read the Japanese translation.
Well, right, exactly. Yeah. And the actors know because they've read it in their own language. And I think you have to be a fan of the play, because I've heard reviewers talk about how they love this play and it's interesting to see this. And and you see little bits of the play throughout the movie, and I feel like if I knew the play, I'd like it better. It's, it's shot beautifully, it's acted well, but it's just, I don't know. I kept waiting for something interesting to happen, and it just really never did. King Richard, I gave 7 out of 10.
Oh yeah, I enjoyed King Richard a lot. Why did you? Because I felt it was better than 7. What were your thoughts on that?
What were my thoughts on that? I remember really liking it. I just remember thinking, there's nothing that's happening that is out of my expectations. I saw the preview and knew the subject matter and pretty much had predicted.
Did you know the story already?
Not really.
Oh.
But I knew enough to know the broad strokes, and the movie doesn't stray from that at all,
See, I guess I wonder if part of it is I knew almost nothing. Like that whole cultural phenomenon missed me. Other than, I guess, if you ask me, like, do you know Venus and Serena? I'm like, the tennis players, right? But that's about all I knew.
Yeah,
and so all the little
similar for me.
details of him refusing to let them play and all, I was like, what?
Yeah. No, me too. I'm not a tennis watcher, so I didn't. It was interesting to see those details, but one of the things that kind of bothers me about this movie and other movies is, a big theme of the movie was that the father was simultaneous. The question mark that you would say when you're writing the tagline of this script is the father a jerk face or actually a hero? Because everyone thinks of him as a jerk face at times, but we as the audience know, well, he's being the hero because he's protecting the daughters. And so we're at no point are we thinking that he's a jerk face. All the time, the way it's written and the way it's portrayed, he's obviously the hero. He's doing the right thing. And everyone else is the jerk face. But that is a trope of biopics that I find doesn't pull me in because it's probably not true, right? The father, like they would say, there was this whole theme of, well, you're saying you're saving your daughters, but what is really happening is it's all about you. There was that accusation about you do all these interviews. It's all about you. It's not about your daughters. You claim it's about your daughters. And there was a little bit of that, but nothing probably close to what he was actually like in real life. You know what I mean? And I find that when you get a bunch of people, sort of script by committee, and you also get an actor like Will Smith who doesn't want to portray a real person in a disrespectful way, it lacked nuance just completely. There was nothing about the story, like the Elton John musical. That movie had nuance to it. The Elton John character was, you could be like, oof, that wasn't good, Elton John. And Elton approved of it. He was like, yeah, let's go for it. And so it just didn't have anything there. But 7 out of 10. That's a good movie.
Do you feel like maybe Will Smith was afraid that misportraying him or portraying him in a negative light would be kind of like a slap across the face to Richard?
I knew it was going somewhere, but I didn't know where.
It's the longest setup in history.
I like it though, bro, because sometimes you got to let it breathe. Nightmare Alley. Did you see that?
No, that sounds fun though. What is that? Is that a horror movie?
It's a film noir with Bradley Cooper.
No, right. That was a nominated one, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And
no, I didn't see that.
Like with the Michelle Yeoh movie, I want to give this 2 different ratings. I want to give it like a 8 or 9 out of 10 for style and interesting visuals, or I don't know, interesting world. But I give it a 5 out of 10 in terms of just how entertaining it is. Again, too long.
Wow.
And
that's a big gap.
me and Stacy both about, the first half you're like, okay, let's see where this goes. I'm into it. And then after a while, I'm just like, oh God, can we wrap this thing up at some point? Like it doesn't have to be this long. The ending is arguably the most exciting part, the last act. But anyway, and I get why you would need it to be that long to some extent, because the way it sort of pays off in the end, you have to have seen the main character kind of go on a journey. But I don't know. I thought it was I thought it was pretty boring. The Mitchells versus the Machines, which was another Oscar nominated. What did you think of it?
Surprisingly a fun movie. There are some movies that when I see the preview, it removes all desire for me to watch them. And this was one of them. But I have a really bad track record when it comes to this. For example, I didn't want to see Coco. I didn't want to see... there's many movies that...
You didn't want to see Turning Red.
Movies.
You didn't want to see Turning Red.
Turning Red, right. But this one in particular, I didn't want to see because there's something about it that I was like... this just seems like a cheap thing. I don't know. You know, and actually one of the ones that did actually end up proving my feelings was the Onward. That was the Pixar movie, Onward.
Yeah.
And I feel like that was a
okay.
movie where it probably went through several rewrites or something. But this one, on the other hand, I was forced to watch because of my kids. And I was happy I did because it was a very funny movie.
How many Birdos?
7.5 probably.
Yeah, I gave it a 7. I thought it was great. I felt like the ending got absurd.
Yeah,
but,
certainly.
but the humor and the storyline, and again, the main dramatic plot is there's tension between the dad and the daughter who is about to leave the house. And in that movie, the way they portray the daughter and the father, sometimes they're jerk faces. It adds nuance.
It's not clean.
Yeah. The action is pretty good, and the animation was an animation style that I haven't seen in a while. It's like, I think they call it cell animation or something. It's obviously CGI, but it looks like they're trying to make it look like it's drawn, and there's a pretty interesting look to it. And I thought it was really great. And a movie I watched from 1996 with Kerry Russell called The Babysitter's Seduction. So Kerry Russell, a very young Kerry Russell. So I looked it up. She would have been like
The
18.
Babysitter's Seduction.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Kerry Russell would have been like 18 at the time, and she becomes a babysitter, and I can't remember exactly the plot, but there's some sort of relationship with the father, and someone's evil in the situation. Is the babysitter, is the father? I forget. But I gave it a 1 out of 10. It was awful. I mean, it is.
Oh,
just
okay. It was bad.
one of the worst things I've ever seen. Stacy and I watched The Mayor of Easttown, which, of course, aired a long time ago, but we finally finished it, I don't know, like a month ago or something. You haven't seen it, right?
No.
Is this Apple TV, Mayor of Easttown? Where is that?
I don't know.
Or HBO Max? I think
I
it
don't
might be
think I've
HBO
even
Max.
heard of this. What is
It's
this?
with Kate Winslet, and it's about a murder that takes place in Pennsylvania, and the mayor of Easttown that's her name, Mare, or Mary, I think, and she is a police officer.
It's not the mayor, it's the mayor.
Mayor, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So she's a police officer, and I gave it 8 out of 10. I thought it was really good. I think it's definitely worth it.
I'm actually dumb. I did watch an episode of this.
Oh, okay.
Like, it's episodes or it's a movie?
Yeah, episodes, maybe like 10.
Okay, then I'm right. I watched an episode of this, and I think I got confused because I thought you said mayor, but then when you said mayor, I'm like, oh wait, that sounds familiar. Yeah,
Did you like
I
it?
enjoyed what I saw it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't seen the whole thing though.
Talking about Will Smith again, I watched Men in Black 3, but I think we already talked about that.
We talked about that, yeah. And I got to rewatch it because I don't think I ever did see it.
Spider-Man No Way Home. Oh my goodness. Tell us the story about you building up to that movie.
Yeah, okay. So I wanted to see it with my daughters because it turns out I had shown them the original Spider-Man, like the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, and they loved it. And especially my little one was like obsessed with Spider-Man for a bit there. So I thought, okay, but
Side note, why do you think kids are... I feel like kids, including myself when I was young, what is it about Spider-Man?
Yeah, right? I mean, first of all, the idea of like you're able to swing from buildings, it's kind of very rebellious.
Superman
yeah, but Superman's like too over the top. Like, you're flying. Fine, now you can fly. But Spider-Man's like a kid. That's the other thing. He's a kid, and he gets to swing from everything. Mm-hmm. It's kind of fun. He's dressed in a Halloween costume.
Was Peter Parker always a kid? Because when I was a kid, I felt like Peter Parker was like a regular adult. Was he always a teenager?
That's a good question. I know he was always very young. I don't know if he was always a teenager or like early 20s, but he was always young. I think the original story is he was a teenager. But
have you noticed that the look of Aunt May gets younger and younger and younger.
I know. It's so ridiculous.
Yeah.
Now she's like his cousin.
Yeah. But anyway, so
I was like, okay, I want to see that, but I knew, I wish I didn't, but I knew like, oh, I bet you it's, okay, I see they're going to do a little multiverse thing. So I'm like, well, okay, we can't just go watch that. That'll ruin everyone's lives. So we need to do it. We need to like build up to it. And so we started this campaign to watch not only every single Spider-Man movie leading up to it, but also watching all the Avengers, catching them up on all the stuff. Now, we didn't actually watch every single Marvel movie because that's just too much, but I watched key ones, and of the Spider movies, all of them except the second one in the new series, which I later regretted because actually that we should have watched it right before this one.
But Andrew Garfield one.
Andrew Garfield. So when we went to watch it, we definitely watched the two Andrew Garfield ones. I mean, we didn't watch the one with Jake Gyllenhaal, which was the one right before this one. And I regretted not watching it because I realized, okay, they don't even know why he's just been outed, but okay. Anyway, so we went and watched it in the theater, and it was this awesome experience because I'm sitting there, of course, I'm reliving all the little moments of like, oh my gosh, there they are. And yet I'm looking over and my daughter.
So if you don't know, and we won't spoil it, that because I think it's in the previews. Or is it in the previews?
I don't know because I didn't watch the previews, but I knew.
Anyway, I won't spoil it. If watching Spider-Man No Way Home, the Spider-Man that just came out late last year, it involves interweaving all the previous movies. Yeah. And if you are familiar with the previous movies, particularly if you love the previous movies, or at least some of them, it really pays off in this movie.
And if you didn't, it's a little bit of an issue because there's going to be a lot of scenes and things where you're like, I don't care. What am I looking at right now?
Yeah. Like your brother was texting.
Yeah, well, instead, I'm sitting there and my two daughters are so into it. And every moment they reveal something, they're like, oh my God. The other thing is that they also both of them really love Doctor Strange. And he's prominent in this movie too. So that was also really fun. Yeah. I had a blast in that movie.
How many Birdos?
Oh, I give that one. Okay, this is a dual score for me. Like, the child in me gives it a 10.5. But it did have some movie things that I would dock it. So I'd give it a 9 overall.
Yeah, I gave it a 9. I thought it was incredible, and I cried half of the movie. I mean, just little things, like little things that were happening. I'm crying, and I just thought, so there's a new thing in the MCU where they're doing this multiverse thing, and when I first think about it, it's like, oh, it's such a cop-out, right? Because you basically can do anything you want. And, getting back to the Michelle Yeoh movie, a similar thing. But I feel like the MCU and everything always at once, all at the same time, or everywhere. Anyway.
Everything, everywhere, all at once.
Okay, yeah. If you write a good script, it actually makes sense. I mean, even in light of the fact that just last year or a year and a half ago was the cartoon version of Spider-Man, which was also a multiverse,
and it was a great movie too.
And that was a great movie. Yeah. And so we're coming up on another and then the Loki TV show. Did you watch that?
Not yet. No.
I think you have to.
Multiverse.
I think you have to because at the very end, there's a character that you probably know from the comic books, but the way that it's played out, I've seen that character in the new Doctor Strange trailers. So
I see. I haven't seen those trailers either. So okay.
I think their new Thanos is essentially introduced, or at least the concept of. I don't know if we're seeing a Thanos character or a Thanos phenomenon, like a what do you call it, a disaster of the universes or something, is introduced in Loki. Anyway, I'm just really impressed that they would sit down, write a multiverse movie, have obvious fan service and a passing of the torches, if you will.
Yes.
Repeat the exact same basic premise of the hit cartoon and yet make an amazing movie that was funny and interesting and at heart, and and his friends, Zendaya and that other kid, really funny and
stressful. And again, you've mentioned this before. It's dangerous with these superhero movies, especially the modern ones, that you're just like so over the top. The aliens and the powers are so over the top, and then so you feel like, well, no one's at risk here, whatever.
Right.
Sure, the puny humans are at risk, but whatever. They're extras. And yet in this movie, and I think Spider-Man lends itself well to that, because see, Spider-Man isn't like an over-the-top crazy. Even with his little nano suit, he's still in trouble a lot, and he gets slammed around a lot, and he is still just a human, and his strength is limited, and he doesn't have laser shooting out of his eyes. So you still feel those tense moments of, oh God, what's going to happen?
Yeah. It's going to be hard to even, rise to that level with whatever next Spider-Man movie they make. Yeah. So they've really done a good job.
By the way, I just rewatched Back to the Future last night with my kids, because it had been a couple of years since they watched it, and we all love it. Man, that is a masterclass in stressful situations with lots of tension.
Yeah.
The whole sequence when they're trying to send him back to the future with the clock tower is just a masterclass in script writing, right? Because everything goes wrong. He's sitting there, he's trying to tell Doc about like the thing about the future, and he's like, he doesn't want to listen. So he writes the note, but then he finds the note, but then he tears it up. You're like, no. And then the cable comes unplugged because the lightning storm. And then Doc's trying to plug the cable in, and he nearly dies in the process. And finally, when he finally gets it unplugs from the other end. And meanwhile, Marty's car won't start. And everything's just like piling. And yet, because what's going to happen, he's going to make it, but yet it's really good at making you feel like, nope, we might just see the end of the movie here.
Yeah. And let's look up how long that movie is.
It's probably 4 hours, 5 hours.
Future. Well, actually, it's 2 hours long.
Well, but 2 hours is not 3 hours. And
right.
That
I'm
is a long movie.
Because in my head, I would have thought it would have been 90 minutes.
Right. And in the 80s, there were a lot of shorter movies.
Right. Yeah, I recently, for some reason, decided to. I think I was watching a YouTube video where they were breaking down the timeline of Back to the Future and how everything fit together. And so then I started to watch the sequels, especially the second one, to try to figure out how the whole timeline works out.
Yeah.
And the first time I saw Back to the Future 2 and 3, I liked them. But as time goes on, I more and more dislike them. Like, 2
that
is
was
just
a big drop in quality between
and 3 is just a stupid Western. It's a bad Western, and it's like interesting.
I like them because of the nostalgia and because it does wrap up a story that they set up at the end of the first one. But no question, like the first one is a masterpiece, and the other ones are.
Yeah, I mean the second one is such a typical sequel, in that they literally go back to the town in the 50s, and we revisit Biff and we revisit McFly and but now Marty's in another part. He's watching himself, and it's just like, can't you come up with? And then of course with 3, they actually did do a completely different story, but it was a bad story.
Yeah. Now, although I definitely agree with you, there was an aspect of that I found interesting, because I hadn't seen it before at the time, right? Because it's like, whoa, it's the same scene from a different perspective. And that, I think nowadays that's been done in a billion ways in many movies, but at the time it was sort of, and then again, at a time when I was a kid, which I hadn't seen that much stuff to begin with, I thought, whoa, that's really mind trippy.
Yeah, there were similar scenes in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure that I remember as a kid going like, whoa. I saw another movie called Barefoot Gen. It's a Japanese movie, came out in 1983. It's
an old one. Okay.
Yeah, it's a cartoon. about the bombing of Hiroshima.
Oh my God.
It's similar to Grave of the Fireflies, if you're familiar. And that
Yeah, you've so we've talked about that one because it's one of your favorites, right? And
yeah.
I think I told you that I was watching it during some party, and so I barely paid attention, and that I need to go back and watch it.
Yeah, well, Barefoot Gen, I think, predates Grave of the Fireflies and is equally amazing. I gave it 9 out of 10.
Is it the same style?
No,
No.
not because you could say Grave of the Fireflies is very much like Hayao Miyazaki.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure Miyazaki worked on it. I don't think he directed it, but Barefoot Gen is like more, I would say, typical anime, sort of average Japanese anime style. But yeah, just powerful, depressing. They depict the bombing. And it shows you. I've often thought, like, how come we don't have more movies about what it was like for the citizens to go through the bombing? There are some movies for sure, but not a lot of really visceral ones.
I've ever seen a single one, actually.
Like, think about the iconic historical significance of the bombing of Nagasaki and Hiroshima, and yet, can you think of a movie that depicts what that was like, aside from like Attack on Titan or Godzilla movies?
No, I think it's such a sensitive topic, I guess.
But not sensitive enough for Japan not to make movies about it. They've made cartoons about it.
Yeah.
Or the bombing of Dresden, or the experience of the average German as the Russians are rolling over East Germany.
Yep.
I feel like there are interesting stories that have yet to be told well enough, but maybe I just don't know of the landscape of the film.
I wonder if part of it is that there is a sense of guilt of, extreme measures taken in an extreme circumstance, and yet so horrific, and so maybe no one stepped up to the plate of telling that story on this side of the ocean.
While we're on the topic, briefly, what I will say is that the historians and the analysts that I respect, writers that I respect, and there's a lot of nuances to this, of course, will, once I learn about the context of the bombing and the decision made and what was at stake and the pros and cons of dropping the bombs, to me, as a Japanese American, I stand by Truman's decision to drop the bomb. It is an awful decision, but there's so many. Let me just kind of list a few data points just while we're on it, because I feel like this is being lost to history. I feel like there's a new generation of people that are just like, oh, American and their atrocity with the atomic bomb, and it's like, do you not understand? Do you not understand history? Like that if you just it's not like we just flew over to Japan and dropped the atomic bomb. Like, there was a reason why we did that. One, we were already bombing. In fact, the firebombing of Tokyo is arguably much more destructive and deathly than the atomic bombs were. Mm-hmm. So that was already happening. We are also carpet bombing Germany, and as a way of, taking away industry, but also demoralizing the population so that there would be pressure to end the war. But in Japan, it was a very real fact that the citizens were, what do they say, when you're radicalized, to the point where if we put boots on the ground, because they weren't surrendering, they had every reason to surrender, but they weren't, and they were losing. They'd lost basically everything except for their main island. And it was estimated that if we put boots on the ground, not only would we lose hundreds of thousands of Americans, but there would be millions of Japanese citizens who would die, because when we landed on these other islands where there were Japanese, people, Iwo Jima, these other places, there were citizens, there were regular families that were living on these islands. And they also fought. Kids and wives were fighting to the death, or they were killing themselves because they had been propagandized to that the Americans were going to do something to, or they didn't want to deal with the shame of being taken prisoner. And so the death toll, if you just want to think about the Japanese people, would have been greater. Most historians, all the experts agree that by dropping the bomb, although you're killing a lot of innocent people in this really horrific way, and then of course there's radiation sickness that lasts after. You perhaps saved millions upon millions of Japanese lives. Yeah. And there were other considerations, of course, that we didn't want Russia, we didn't want the Soviet Union to have a influence in East Asia. If the war was protracted, the Soviet Union could have got involved and begin to basically gobble up the entire world aside from the Americas. So that's it in a nutshell. And you can disagree with me, that's fine, but I'm just repeating what the experts will say.
I don't know very much at all of the details because not growing up in this country, it's surprising how little history of this country I learned, and even World War II and stuff like that. And yet what little I know, and I guess embarrassingly, what little video games I've played on the subject matter, had led me to believe similarly that, it was a necessary evil. But in either case, it is interesting that it hasn't been explored enough in Western movies, it seems like.
Yeah. There was one movie, Empire of the Sun. It's barely referenced, right? Christian Bale as a kid, and he sees a flash. Anyway. I also, as I was telling you, Berto, watched Biodome.
Oh my God, with the Pauly Shore.
Yeah, and Stephen Baldwin, by the way.
I'm pretty sure I liked that movie at the time as a terrible movie. I mean, I was aware even then that it was not a good movie.
1996.
I feel like I enjoyed it.
It is such a 90s movie. There are so many different things. It's funny how when, maybe even 10 years ago, if you would have said, well, what really defines the 90s? I would have been like, I don't really know. And I remember thinking this in the 90s when people would refer to the 80s. They'd be like, what defines the 80s? And I'm like, I don't know. But you need enough time to go by before you can look back at a decade and say, oh my God, that's so that decade. And we've had enough time for the 90s. It's like Biodome is so 90s. And
I think Pauly Shore in general is a 90s figure.
Yeah. This movie
Encino Man is...
Yeah. I feel like Encino Man, I liked it. In fact, let me look it up because I've been rating...
Encino Man is certainly better than Biodome. It's still not a good movie, though.
IMDb. Because I've been, rating movies on IMDb since... I gave it a 4. But I gave Encino Man a 4. I gave Biodome a 1. I mean, this is... About right. It's not only bad, but it's politically offensive on multiple levels.
Oh, it is? Okay, see, that I wouldn't have known at the time probably because when I watched it, it was what year was it? 94?
96.
96. I was in college. It was I don't think we even saw it in the theater. It was probably on VHS and late night. And it was one of those movies that was great to just make fun of.
Yeah.
And so I had a lot of fun, but I don't remember a single thing, just that there's Pauly Shore and a Biodome.
It's not funny. It's grotesque in not a good way.
Is it 80s level offensive?
There's probably, I think there's gay jokes and massive amounts of misogyny.
Yeah.
And male privilege and it's just even that aside, even if you got rid of that, because as I'm watching it, I'm like, well, it's the 90s. That was the way things were. It's gross, but what are you going to do? But in addition to that, it's not funny. The jokes are, I have a feeling the way it looks like the way they shot this movie was they're like, well, Pauly Shore is a big star and someone thought he was hilarious. And so they're like, we'll just let Pauly Shore kind of riff. There's a lot of Pauly Shore riffing. And then Stephen Baldwin is not a funny man.
He's not. And I don't know if you know what he's become, but he is he's
absolutely
pretty fringe.
But he's young. He's probably 25 or 22 at the time. And it's terrible. It's like there's no comedy. It's so annoying. and these two women are in love with them. Actually, multiple women are in love with them, and you're just like, why?
Because he's Pauly Shore.
But it's just so bad. There's a couple lines I will say where Pauly Shore is riffing where I'm like, because he did have a way of laughing at himself. Anyway,
I just remember feeling like that was just a great late night college stupid movie.
I wouldn't even put it that high. I think it's not watchable.
That, right?
Yeah,
but I mean, it's. Wouldn't you say that it's maybe I don't remember it right, but I felt it was like not exactly The Room, because The Room's kind of like a whole separate level of thing to laugh at, but it was bad enough to where you could make fun of it.
Oh well, yeah. I mean, yeah. The little comedic moments, quote unquote, in this movie are so bad. You could write a dissertation while you're watching this, because it's just so it's so complicated how bad it is. Anyway, I rewatched Berto because again I was watching some YouTube channel about movies, and they started to review the old Planet of the Apes movies from the late 60s, early 70s.
With Charlton Heston and stuff.
Yeah, and so let me tell you my relationship with these movies when I was growing up.
Sure.
And I think only people my age in the United States would be able to identify with this. So I'm born 1970, which is in the middle of these 5 movies, and where I would see them would be online, or not online, on TV.
Huh? Wow.
On TV. So, and they would be on summer afternoon on some random channel. And they were frequently shown, particularly the first one and maybe the second one. And so I watched Planet of the Apes probably a number of times as a kid. And it's pretty easy to understand, even when you're young. And there's some iconic scenes in it. And it's sci-fi. And this is 1968, well before Star Wars, when sci-fi was
totally
pretty goofy, and it's pretty good movie. The ape prosthetics are actually pretty well.
They take themselves seriously, especially that first one.
Yeah. But I had always sort of heard about the other movies, and I had friends who had caught them on random TV and would refer to them. They'd refer to like, oh, you got to watch this one, and they would
Beneath the Planet of the Apes.
Yeah, and my friends would reference them a lot when I was a kid. There's this line where the apes are like, "Don't fight like men, fight like apes," and it's this really funny line, and so it was a big touchstone culturally. Like I had a haircut as I'm growing out my hair in the early 90s, where my friend would call me Cornelius because he thought I looked like
Dr. Cornelius,
one of the apes. And so it was a huge part of my childhood, but I never had the chance to really watch them. Plus, when I saw the sequels occasionally as a kid, I didn't understand them because
it gets a little
and there's no Wikipedia, so I wouldn't even necessarily know which movie is this and where does it fit in the timeline. Because by the 5th movie, it's a pretty complicated storyline, and so I sat down, Berto, and watched all of them.
The quintology.
Yeah,
which is interesting.
What I'll say is that it's not as terrible as I thought it would be. The first one in particular is still good.
Yeah.
The second one, I think, it starts to kind of go downhill, but then there's, I think, the fourth one or the third one where the apes actually come back in time to the United States in the 70s, and so it's comical. It's played up for comedy, and that one was pretty good.
Disco apes.
Right. And so I was surprised that a movie made in 1968, a sci-fi movie about Planet of the Apes, still stood up. But the other ones, I can't really say that about. Anyway.
I mean, I have a similar situation with them but years later, because what happens is someone in Colombia brought those movies over to TV as well, and they would show them on TV. It's just years later. Now, maybe they were also showing them in the 70s. I don't know. but when it was early 80s as a kid there, and I remember vividly the first time I watched the first one on TV, and because my mind was blown with the big reveal at the end. And I just remember that whole movie felt so intense. I was so scared. I was so like, oh my God, what's up? And then, you did it, you maniacs, blah, blah. I was just blown away. I remember it so well. And they would show the other ones. I don't know if they showed all 5. I remember watching at least 2 other ones.
Did you see the one where they're worshiping the nuclear missile?
Yes, I definitely saw that one, yes.
Did you see the one where they come back in time to...
I don't think I saw the 70s one. At least it doesn't sound familiar, but maybe. All I know is that they would show them on TV. For all I know, they did show all of them. I just remember like watching 3 of them. The first one, the second one, and another one.
There's another one. The fourth one is where they start in a little bit in our future as they start to tame apes, and then the apes rebel, and it's sort of the beginning of apes breaking away from
I don't
humans.
really remember well. All I know, I remember the first one very clearly, and then I kind of have memories of the second one. And I know why I watched at least one other one, because, it had all every title got a little more convoluted. But yeah, it was great. And then I rewatched them in high school. Not all of them. I watched the first and the second one in high school, and I still loved it. And then years later, I probably was in my late 20s, I rewatched the first one again, and I still loved it. So I bet you if I watched it now, I would still like it.
Yeah. Boy, I'm just going to kind of rip through this. There's a number of movies still. Ghostbusters Afterlife. Well, we got to talk about this because you texted me and you were just like, ah. So how many Birdos out of 10 would you give this one?
Oh, man. As a movie, I'd give it 8. But another one of these little child Birdo gave it a 9.
Yeah, I gave it a 7. I thought it was a solid movie. The ending, I'm like, yeah, okay. I mean, it's a Ghostbusters movie. You gotta have like the ghosts.
Goofy.
Yeah, but the first hour, 45 minutes, I thought was delightful, interesting. Yeah. There's all, and I love it because for the most part, they pretty much just say, let's just have new characters.
That's right.
In a new kind of environment. Let's not try to just copy.
Yeah, they could have done it still in New York City.
Yeah.
There's just, copies of the original characters, sort of. And
right.
Nope.
Yeah. So, 7 out of 10. I liked it. Cop Shop came out last year, which is a pretty unknown movie. I gave 8 out of 10. I thought it was pretty entertaining. Essentially, what happens is a precinct gets invaded by criminals, and there's and it's a big kind of I don't know, it's not like a big shoot 'em up. I mean, there's definitely guns and whatnot, but it's more it's smaller than I'm describing it. It's focusing on a few police officers and
Is this based on a true story or
no? And a couple bad guys. It's kind of a comedy.
Oh, I see.
Comedy action movie. Downsizing. I rewatched it with Matt Damon.
I never did see that one. That's the one where they get little?
Yeah. The first time I saw it, I gave it like a 5 or 6, but I rewatched it and I gave it a 7. I think it's a solid movie.
Wait, hold on. Now, did I watch that? The thing is, this is so that because the world's getting too crowded, or why is it that they can?
Yeah, environmental concerns.
Right, okay.
And so people are volunteering.
Like I maybe did watch this.
But the secondary character, the co-star, is played by an Asian American woman who plays a woman who cleans houses, and her accent is very, let's just say, over the top Vietnamese accent, and I think it bothered a lot of people. It seemed like a racist depiction.
Oh, okay.
But I'll say, as an Asian person, it didn't hurt my feelings. It felt like, she's a little cartoony, but at the same time, she's a 3-dimensional character in a lot of ways, actually. In a lot of ways that I feel like people don't give her credit for. Okay. She's a sexual creature. She has her own needs sexually. She has her own needs romantically. I mean, you could argue that it is demeaning in certain ways, but I don't know. I thought it was. Okay. I thought it got not great reviews at the time, but I was like, oh, not bad. I think if you sort of have low expectations. Have we talked about Licorice Pizza on the podcast yet, Berto?
Yeah, we must have, right? Because, well,
I know I've talked about it with you. We haven't done an Oscar episode.
We didn't do an Oscar.
I don't know if we've talked about
the.
Well, let me just say, if I've talked about it before, I won't bore you, but I'll say this was my favorite movie of 2021. I mean, I gave it 10 out of 10 easily. I loved this movie, and I understand why some people wouldn't like it, because it's aimless. There's really no plot, and it's Paul Thomas Anderson at his best.
No, because we even had to rank our PTA movies, so we did talk about it at some point.
Okay, so I won't repeat that, but I loved it.
Yeah, I loved it too. Oh my God, it was so good.
Pam and Tommy, the TV show. Did you see any of that?
No, I heard the controversy though, but I didn't see it.
What was the controversy?
Well, that it was like they were giving the main actress, I think, grief for, I think Pamela Anderson didn't sign off on the documentary.
Yeah.
And so...
Well, right. So she was like not happy that it happened because she's like, oh, great. This is just going to reopen all those old wounds. But I'm sorry to her for that, and that sucks for sure. I mean... It would feel really crappy to have that happen, but I liked it. I gave it 7 out of 10. I didn't watch the whole thing, but I watched a lot of it with Stacy. Watched the whole thing, and I would kind of sit down and watch a bit with her. But yeah, it moves pretty quick. The characters are pretty interesting.
Okay.
Basically, I think what it does is it totally vindicates Pamela Anderson, because the whole narrative. There's a lot of this happening now, right? Like, with Paris Hilton and the Britney Spears documentaries and all this stuff's coming out. It's just like, what you were fed by the media was a bunch of misogynistic, salacious crap.
Oh, interesting.
And with Pam, it was the same thing. I mean, because back then when the sex tape came out, if someone came up to you and asked you like a year or two later if Pam leaked it on purpose, or because she became, she was pretty famous and became more famous, would you have said she did it on purpose or that it was something of a violation, or what would you have said?
Oh, I don't know what I would have said then, because I never saw it, and B, I probably would have thought, well, it's probably done on purpose or something.
Right. Yeah. But I think that was the consensus.
Yeah.
And when you watch this movie, you're like, oh my God, it was anything but that.
Yeah.
Essentially what happened was Tommy Lee was, they were living in a house together, Pam and Tommy hired this guy, played by Seth Rogen. Seth Rogen? Yeah. Who is like a handyman or some sort. And Tommy shafts him on the payment. And as anger and this handyman guy is kind of a social awkward. His life is going down the tubes. He's getting divorced, and they actually spent a fair amount of time with him. And he actually steals Tommy Lee's stuff. He steals like a chest full of stuff from his house in revenge or something.
Oh, and it included the tape.
And then he released the tape on the internet, and of course the internet was just becoming a thing.
Yeah.
And we go down that whole road, and the whole time Pam and Tommy are just mortified by it. They're both Pam is obviously just like, oh my God, what? I just can't believe that's out there.
Yeah.
And Tommy Lee included. He's just like, how come no one cares about my feelings? Like, just because I'm a guy, like it's fine. And they're like, well, but your schlong is so big, like it's such a flattering thing.
Damn, it's my privacy.
But then they show him kind of leaning into it a little bit eventually, where he starts to brag about things.
I see.
And I thought it was an even if this was a fictional story, I think it would be worth a watch, because it's well acted. It moves pretty quick. But knowing this is a real story, and this is probably close to the real thing that happened, I think it's interesting as well. It's just behind the scenes, and I think it can tell us a thing about today, which is, whatever narrative is emerging from a situation, like, let's slow down, particularly
Like
if
whatever you see in a movie may not be what really happened.
I finished Squid Game. You haven't finished it.
I have not. But you say you didn't enjoy it. I'm enjoying it. I'm only like 3 episodes in though.
Yeah, I think the beginning is pretty good.
Does it overpromise?
But the second half, it's just so drawn out and boring. And so I gave it a 4 out of 10. I mean, it's watchable. And everyone loved it, right? Everyone's like, oh my God, it's the best thing ever. But I will tell you, Berto, the best thing ever related to Squid Game
is the remake or the real life.
The real life one by Mr. Beast.
Yeah.
Have you seen it?
I haven't seen. I've seen all the promotional stuff for it. Yeah.
So let me tell you how I even got here. So every once in a while, I would see Mr. Beast. If you don't know Mr. Beast, he's basically like he's as big as Logan Paul. Like he's gigantic on YouTube and he's young but his whole thing is doing these stunts. And you might have heard about a guy who was counting to 100,000 and it took him like 40 hours and he filmed himself and posted it on the internet. But eventually he got so much money from YouTube that now he'll give away Lamborghinis and stuff. And every video is him doing these just like super expensive things. Like he'll give away I watched this one series where he gave away $1 million to random subscribers who were on the show, and they had to keep their hand on the $1 million. It was a big block of the $1 million, and whoever let their hand off were eliminated. And there were like it was a tournament, and it ended with these 5 people, and then this one guy who was like I think like a pizza delivery driver or something. He won $1 million because
pizza delivery drivers would have it because you have to handle that pizza, not let go of it, and it's hot.
Yeah. And so whenever I would see him on the internet, I would never click on it because I thought he was a political guy that I would get annoyed by. I don't know why. I think he looks like one of the political guys that you will watch. Like, does he look like Sam Harris? Is that a person? Anyway.
Oh, Sam Harris is a person. I guess he kind of looks a little bit, but Sam Harris is not a political person.
Oh, I thought Sam Harris was a political person. Anyway.
He's a philosopher person.
I thought that Mr. Beast was someone that I would not like, but I really love this other channel, William Osmond, who is this guy in California, and he does engineering videos where he makes different things in his house but he's super funny and charming. I think William Osmond is like one of the most charming, funny, interesting people on the internet. I think he's the best. And he a few months ago made this video. So I just discovered him like 6 months ago, and then a couple of months into discovering him, he posts a video where he's just talking to the camera about how people attack him in the YouTube comments and how that makes him feel and how it demoralizes him and how it causes him to procrastinate, and then it's no longer fun to make engineering videos anymore. And he says, I'm done. Even though he has like 1 or 2 million subscribers and he's making probably a lot of money off of YouTube, he just is like, I'm packing it in because this is too hard on me emotionally. And I could totally relate to that. And it's not a lot of times when, and he actually interviewed a lot of other YouTubers at the end of the video, like, how do you deal with this? And there are different perspectives. And I thought it was a tragedy that he went off YouTube, but I also totally respected him. I was just like, I'm glad he did that because I can see doing that. I can see that doing myself. It can be really awful. I mean, someone just today on Instagram I don't even know what he was saying. I just saw a little bit of it, and he's just like, he said like, you so gay or something like that. And it was just, and he left me like a voice message, and I didn't listen to it. Yeah. I mean, he was, that's kind of stuff happens all the time. But then he came back. So last week or 2 weeks ago,
the YouTuber.
The William Osmond. And I'm like, oh my God, he's back. I even emailed him and I said,
nice.
As a YouTuber and a therapist, I get it, but I suggest you don't read all the comments on YouTube because I think he reads every single comment. Anyway, so I saw a new video by him and I was like, oh, thank God. Like he actually is now making videos again. And the video was of him making, so he refers to this rich guy and it's Mr. Beast. And he's like, this rich guy hired me to make a component of the Squid Game. So Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, a super rich guy at 23 years old, you know, giving out Lamborghinis, and he literally gives houses out. He'll be like, oh my God, this contest for this, and it's a 15-minute video, and he gives away a house at the end of the video. Yeah.
Jeez.
And I mean, they live in North Carolina, so I don't think the prices are that expensive.
But still.
Yeah. But anyway, so they, William Osmond is like, Mr. Beast is recreating the Squid Game, and he wants me to create a squib, which is a you know, in movies when you shoot someone and it's a fake bullet, there'll be a blood splatter from the person's chest. And so they were remaking Squid Game and giving away $500,000, by the way, to the winner. And they had 456 contestants, just like on the TV show. And so William Osmond had to make 456 squibs that with a app would be able to be remotely activated so that when someone, you know, when they're doing the red light, green light, someone can sit there and see someone move after the
quote
green
unquote,
light,
shoot them,
red light, and then quote unquote shoot them, but press the button on the app, and then their chest explodes with blood, and then they know they've died and they have to sit down. And so William Osmond has to go on this just super long, complicated, funny adventure that comes down to the last minute because he's making, and he has to get like 15 of his weird, you know, nerdy YouTube friends together, and they're just on an assembly line, like making these things.
Oh my God.
And I love that video, and I thought, oh my God, William Osmond's back. And then I'm like, what's this Mr. Beast guy? And so I look at the Squid Game, and the Squid Game recreation on YouTube is a billion times better than the TV show. It is amazing because they
got a lot of controversy. Do you know that when it came out?
Oh, it did?
Yeah, because people were saying, this is why I knew about it. People were saying that he was making light of the greater point that the show's trying to make.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, I know, but everyone's taking arms with everything right now.
I mean, Jesus Christ. Yeah. Like, let it go, people. I mean, I haven't heard the argument. Maybe I would understand what they're saying, but
I think it's just one of those things.
He gave $500,000 to one of the and it came down to just like 3 people in the end, and then they played musical chairs, or 5 people in it. Anyway, and there was this one guy who just seemed like a tool, and I'm like, I pray to God he doesn't win, and he might win, but he didn't win, Berto.
Oh, good.
One of the sweet kids won, and that's the other thing about this show is although, you know, a lot of these guys are real kind of fratty on this channel, the Mr. Beast, they're still not a-holes, at least the way they come across. Yeah. And even like Mr. Beast, he has a secondary channel that I watch that's called Mr. Beast Philanthropy, where he gives hundreds of thousands of dollars to charities like every week. He's just, all the money he's making on YouTube, I have a feeling he's funneling half of it to charities and half of it, or a quarter of it to charities and or maybe an eighth to charities and like a quarter of it back to the public. You know, that's his whole thing. But the amount of money that he's giving out, I'm just like, you must be profiting, right? So my God, the amount of money that this guy must have at 23, like, or however old he is. But yeah, so that's my long story about William Osmond and Mr. Beast. And
I'll have to check it out. I definitely wanted to. I just didn't get around to it.
Yeah, I mean, I found the Squid Game recreation more entertaining than the TV show. Because it's real. You know, it's not when you're watching the TV show, like, have you gotten to the scene where they're in the neighborhood and they have the marble game?
Do they have the marble game? So here's what I've seen is the first.
You would have known if you would have seen the marble game.
Probably not then. I mean, I know that, you know, they got kicked out. I think they got back in. That's where I'm at.
Okay. The marble game is one of the best scenes in the whole TV show. And in the Squid Game recreation by Mr. Beast, the marble game, again, was pretty interesting. Because essentially, I won't spoil it because it's just the premise of the game, is that what he did in Mr. Beast is they would film and notice who were friends. They noticed what people were friends, and then they paired up people by friendship.
I see.
And this is later on in the whole. There's only so many people, and then
And that's a problem, right? Because
you have to play
make tough decisions.
Well, you have to play a game, and you have to, and you make up the rules. So if it was you and me, Berto, I have 10 marbles and you have 10 marbles, and we have to play some sort of game, and whoever wins all the marbles wins, and the other person loses.
Gets shot.
Yeah. And so in the TV show, that was an amazing sequence, like really unforgettable. And in the Mr. Beast, I thought it was also really interesting. And there were, people are crying because they're just like, interesting things happen. Anyway, I also saw West Side Story. Did you see it?
I watched about half. Look, I was never a huge fan of West Side Story to begin with. Part of it is when I was a kid, there was this day where it was showing on TV, and my aunt was so excited, and everyone in the family, I think, especially the gals, they were all so excited, and I was too young to get it or care. So I tried to watch a little bit, and it went way over my head, and I was like, and that left a bad taste in my mouth. So as I grew up, every time anyone mentioned West Side Story, I would just roll my eyes. Then I finally, I think, tried to watch it, and I saw it at the Fifth Ave, and I was like, okay.
Oh, a live version.
Yeah, I saw it with Tall Rory, and it was cool. I liked it. I was like, and the music is nice and stuff like that. But I'm not obsessed by it. And so when this one came out, I didn't really want to watch it. I watched it for the Oscars, but about halfway through, and this was true of my wife too, who does love West Side Story, we were both like, we didn't feel we had to keep going. Like, we know where this is going. We've seen this before. I think we're good.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I felt similarly about Dune, that, not similarly exactly, because I really liked the Denis Villeneuve Dune, but it was diminished by the fact that I knew the story so well.
Right.
And I was like, yeah, okay, I know what's going to happen. I know that.
I know what's up.
Yeah. I liked it. I gave it 8 out of 10. I like West Side Story. I've always liked it. It's one of my parents' favorite movies. I think it's my parents. I think they will claim, if pressed, that this is their movie. I think they might have even seen it when they were kids together. But yeah, I also watched a 1988 movie, Earth Girls Are Easy.
I love that, with Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, who else was in that?
Gina Davis.
Gina Davis, right? Who had been in The Fly with Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah, and they were a couple, I believe. Also, a young Jim Carrey, and
right,
one of the Damon. What's the
Damon Wayans?
Damon Wayans, yeah,
or one of them, yeah.
And also Julie Brown, who was famous for 15 minutes in 1988.
Yeah.
But yeah, I gave it 7 out of 10. I thought it was. I'd always heard about it because it was a pretty.
Oh, you had never seen it?
I'd never seen it.
Oh, okay.
Pretty iconic movie that I'd never seen, and I always thought, would I like it? And I watched it, and I was like,
it's pretty entertaining.
Yeah,
they're aliens.
Yeah, I'm sort of bothered by the fact that it's not more famous. Like, I feel like of the things from the 80s, because this movie is so 80s.
Very much so, yeah.
And it's wild, and it's interesting and funny and dynamic and comedic, and it has romance and sex in it, and but it's PG-13, and I feel like this movie needs more love, but say levy. Coda, did you watch Coda?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Oh my gosh, that was a moving movie. That one was my favorite. I voted in the Oscar party. I voted for the dog one, The Power of the Dog, and I really loved The Power of the Dog. I know how you feel about it, but Coda, I cried. I loved that movie so much. I was totally not expecting it to move me so much. It was great.
Yeah. How many Birdos?
Oh, I give that a 10.
I gave it a 7. Liked it a lot. Really liked it. Very touching. And my wife felt similarly, that, solid movie, really great, but just not transcendent the way like a licorice pizza would be or something. But really good. And
I think for me, what happened was that, first of all, and this is just a detriment to me, is that I'm not as informed with the community of people that are hearing impaired, and I don't know sign language, and I've seen a few movies that I've loved with that theme in mind, but this one, it's just like you're immersed in it, and just seeing all their struggles with mundane things, and yet how within their world they're perfectly fine, and they have their own family life, and everything is totally normal to them. And yet from our perspective, it's like, a foreign world. And then as the two shores clash, that's where, you get some of that friction. And then just thinking, wow, how this person would be at the edge of that, where they inhabit both worlds. That's unbelievable. The fact that it was about music, and that moment when she is auditioning and she starts signing, I lost it. I mean, there's crying, but I was actually kind of losing control a little bit, like whimpering, because I was like it just pulled my strings so hard. Yeah. So I think I gave it a 10 because it just moved me so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Belfast. Did you see that?
That one I couldn't finish because we were running out of time before your party, and so we were watching it. It is interesting. It's cute. It's not at all what I expected the movie to be, because from the previews, I just thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be more a war movie, and it is a war movie, but it was not really. It was a kid movie, and it was fine. I didn't know, therefore, what to make of it. But unfortunately, I didn't get to finish it because it was time to literally get up and go to your party.
Yeah. So. Well, you're probably not missing much. I gave it a 6 out of 10. I thought it was fine. I'm not. If I could go back in time, I would tell myself, just don't watch it. You don't really need to see this. I don't understand the love for this movie. Honestly, I think it's fine, but it's not the end all be all. And I thought that there were parts of the story and of the acting where I'm like, what is that's it? It felt like I feel like it got way bumped up in people's minds because it was made by Kenneth Branagh about his own childhood. And two,
okay, I didn't know that. I didn't know it was about his own childhood.
I mean, I don't know if that's exactly what happened to him, but he's from Belfast. And
but I gotta say that the one of the parts I watched, I was starting to get a little annoyed because. So you know how they show the scene where the sort of the neighborhood bully shows up? It's like, hey, tells the father, you better join our cause,
Right.
And it's kind of a showdown. It's like, next time we come, like, we're not going to be asking. I was like, okay. Then they show another scene where they're like, hey, you better join our cause, and next time I come, it's not going to get so pretty. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then they show like another scene, and I was like, okay, why? Like the tension you built up in the first scene, now you've totally dissipated.
Totally.
There were things like that about
things
it.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like if it wasn't Kenneth Branagh, if it wasn't in black and white, if it didn't have what's her face in it, the grandma, I think it would have been. I don't know if people would have even saw this movie, but because it had those elements, it somehow becomes the best thing ever. I don't know. I was watching. I'm like, when does this turn into like an awesome movie? Because it's fine, but it's not very
I was
good.
feeling that they should have reordered a few things. Like, in my mind, they should have shown us the kids' world a bit first before anything bad happens. Like, because I didn't get a chance to get immersed. He's got his friends. He's got all these little subplots happening. But by that point, I was still like, wait. Can you go back to the other thing? Because, like, it opens with this really dramatic scene with the bombing and the kid and the stuff. But I'm not yet aware or invested in the characters. So now I'm actually expecting it to be about them escaping or the bombing. And then I was like, no, calm down. This is a different kind of movie. I'm like, oh, okay. But I'm still on the other thing you just showed me. Okay, but it's about the dad and the bad bully recruiting. Okay, no, that's kind of not about it either. It's about the kid and his friends. Okay, well, So what I would have done is show me the kid's daily life first, get me familiar with his friends, get some of those subplots right up front, and as I'm carrying, boom, the bad stuff starts happening. And I think I might have enjoyed it better.
Huh. Yeah. I think I thought the movie was going to be like the movie 71, which was a movie about in Belfast, the war that was essentially going on with the military and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
British soldier is caught behind enemy lines in Belfast, and I thought it was going to be something like that. Anyway, I rewatched Deliverance from 1972 with John Voight, Burt Reynolds, Ned Beatty.
Yeah.
7 out of 10, solid movie. As far as the historical significance, particularly 1972, I could put it like 9 out of 10, but yeah, a great movie. Except for and when this happened, when I rewatched it, I remember I thought, wait, what just happened? And I actually Googled it, and no one really knows what happened. So at the very end of the movie, or not at the end of the movie, when was this happening? But anyway, the other guy, not John Voight, Burt Reynolds, or Ned Beatty, but the other guy, the fourth guy, the guy who plays guitar, they're in the canoe, and he just like falls over into the water. Do you remember this part?
Not well, because the last time I saw it, I was in college.
Yeah. Anyway, there's this pivotal scene where one of the guys falls into the water and dies, and you think, oh, are we going to find out why that happened, or did I miss something? And I Googled it, and there wasn't a definitive answer, and I think it was just like there was a missing scene or something.
Yeah.
A similar movie called Southern Comfort from 1981 with Powers Booth and Fred Ward and Keith Carradine. I watched this. I remember when VHS came out, my dad would rent movies, and I think this is one of the movies. I definitely remember seeing this movie when I was like 10 or 12 and loving it, just thinking, wow. And so ever since then, ever since 1982, I've always had this thought of like, Southern Comfort with Powers Booth.
And you've had a good memory of it.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, that was such a good movie. At some point, I should rewatch that classic American film. Well, I rewatched it, and it's fine. It has some moments, but I gave it a 5 out of 10.
I have had that happen to me for sure with movies that I hadn't seen since I was a kid. And then you just, you have these not only rose-colored but you were a kid, you were young. You don't even have to be a kid, right? Like, I mean, there were things in my early 20s that I thought were fantastic that I look back and I'm like, that's ridiculous. And then when you finally watch it again, you're like, oh boy. What was I thinking?
Like Biodome?
Like Biodome. But I got to tell you though, on Deliverance, when I first saw that, I was in high school and we rented the VHS. I was scared to death watching that movie. It presents such a bleak, because I could just picture myself on a riverboat trip with friends and getting stuck in the middle of the mountains, and oh my god, it's so traumatic.
Yeah,
it was
Southern
scary.
Comfort has a similar storyline of like hicks in the bayou that come after these National Guards. I was having a lazy weekend afternoon, and I'm just kind of flipping through the various different subscriptions that I have. It's just amazing, like the amount of awesome movies at my fingertips on my television. It's just like incredible. But I decided to start watching the Eternals, the MCU movie from last year, and I thought, well, I'll just watch the beginning, and because I was trying to remember what happened in the very beginning.
You've already seen it. You don't need to rewatch the whole thing.
Yeah, and I probably saw it in the theater like 6 months ago or something.
Yeah.
I watched the whole movie again.
And it was still awesome.
It's still good. 8 out of 10.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that was such a fun movie. And people hated it. A lot of people hated it.
I don't understand.
I loved it. I thought it was delightful. I had a lot of times it's these movies that I have zero interest to watch, and then they just out of nowhere hit me with a surprise left.
I watched The Last Duel. I think that's Ridley Scott, I believe, with Matt Damon, and
which also got a lot of hate. I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, I gave it 7 out of 10. I think it's definitely watchable, and it essentially it's like Rashomon, where there is a story that's told by 3 different people from different angles, and it's a little long, but it's interesting, and I thought it was a gritty movie. I thought the acting was great, good set pieces.
Matt Damon, right?
Yeah. And Ben Affleck plays a minor character, and Adam Driver plays a major character, and then the female lead is played by the last duel. She's the woman from what is she in? Jodie Comer. She's from Killing Eve. Did you ever see that show? She's also in Free Guy, by the way.
Oh, so, okay. Is she the main gal in Free Guy?
Let's see here. She is the main gal in Free Guy.
She is. I love her. She's great.
Yeah. It looks like Steve from Stranger Things is in Free Guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then
Taika Waititi.
Taika Waititi. The last thing I will mention that I watched recently is the Book of Boba Fett, which we have not talked about yet.
I've only seen the first episode of that.
Oh my God, Berto. Okay.
Sorry, I didn't do my homework. So next time, can we save that one? Because I got to watch it so we can talk about it.
Well, I'll just give it my brief sort of review. So I gave it 7 out of 10, but I really need to break it up. The first half, I would give like maybe a 5 out of 10, honestly.
Oh.
The second half, I would give like a 9 out of 10.
Okay, because I was not that impressed with the first episode.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
The first half it's focusing on Boba Fett, and it feels like a massive downgrade in quality of writing and set pieces and acting and everything from Mandalorian.
Yeah, it definitely felt like, hey, can we do something with less budget?
Yeah, and there's some really stupid things that they introduced. They have this gang of kids called the Mods, and I don't know, once you see them, it looks really stupid. I mean, the Star Wars universe has a lot of possibilities in it, but this looks too like of Earth. And it also screams of trying to appeal to younger people in this really pandering way or something. Anyway.
Okay.
But the second half this isn't really spoiling, I don't think. It starts to integrate a lot more with The Mandalorian, the TV show, and in this really, really great way. Like, they really let some things breathe, things that were introduced in the last season of Mandalorian, and it's slow but interesting and sad. I'll just say there's a satisfying episode where you will be like, that felt good to experience.
So it's worth to go through it.
Definitely. You could literally not watch the first number of episodes and just skip to the latter part and actually enjoy that. But yeah, and I'm kind of worried about the next Star Wars TV shows are coming out, because
Obi-Wan, right? Isn't that?
Yeah. I think Hayden Christensen is in that.
What? They brought him back, huh?
Yeah, I think they might do. The only thing I can think of is they must be doing flashbacks where
that or ghosties.
No, because at Obi-Wan, the TV show takes place between 4 and between
right.
6.
He's still
or between
alive
3 and 4.
Yeah.
Between 3 and 4. It's so Darth Vader is still running wild, and if Hayden Christensen is on it, I'm figuring they must be doing flashbacks to the before times.
I hope so. I hope it's not some weird dumb thing.
Yeah, right.
Like, he's visiting Darth every now and then, and Darth takes his helmet off, and it's still Hayden Christensen.
Yeah, well, that could be, actually. I wouldn't put it past them.
That would suck.
Because they have shown Darth Vader in other things, right? He was in the cartoon. Anyway. All right, Berto. Final word on that episode. If people are still listening...
No one's still listening. Come on.
My goodness.
Oh, man. It's as always, I have a few things to catch up on. Damn it. But you should watch Free Guy, though. I think you'd really enjoy it.
Yeah. I've definitely had that on my list and just haven't got around to it.
Nice.
All right. Well, that does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because
You deserve it.